thousand we would have saved.
Plus, then you get another 4% for being on that as well, so,
Oh, wow.
so, you know, you're looking at close to 20% probably.
Yeah, I mean, there's the money aspect, but it really, I'm also concerned with, we just need to see
So
what our
the-
safety culture is.
So the big trigger is the safety side of it.
Yeah.
And you-
Mitigation,
Yeah, and you have from your proximity to two of the SMCs that come out here,
SMC stands for Safety,
management consultant,
very good.
and they're both, one's in Laurel, one's in Billings, and they love to get out, so they're here probably every other month. So
Good.
we just need to utilize them.
So they're here, who are they talking to?
I'll find that out for you.
Good.
You call them a safety management consultant?
Yeah.
Yeah, cause I'm thinking we might wanna have a meeting or call our safety committee and tell them we wanna
Here's your,
talk to them.
here are your breakdowns of who's on what codes, and there's your codes.
Thank you very much, that was quick. Just call a meeting to them and say, okay, and let them know that, you know, so, and just talk about how frequently are they doing inspections and who's following up on the workers' comp and just, try and, I think we might wanna meet with them more frequently in the near term. But I haven't talked to anybody on the safety committee for over a year. They don't come in and talk to us, so I know they're doing stuff.
Are you guys involved in those safety?
Well, I think
meetings?
there's a commissioner on the committee. When was their last meeting, do you remember?
2 months ago.
Okay. We just kinda need to dust that off and get them a little more engaged, or they may be engaged and I just don't know it,
Okay.
you know. And then we'll follow up on
I know they're doing regular inspections, but they haven't called a meeting lately. So,
Well, they should be, like, you should be discussing these losses that you're having.
yes.
And they're,
really?
yeah, not to the point of like, naming anything, but you know, letting them understand
Yeah.
what the ramifications are. And you're able to put a dollar to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, it's just leading, lagging indicators, you know,
So
so.
just by tightening that up and reducing that, you know, you can pay somebody to do that, just off what you're, you know, keeping your experience mod below one, and then just capitalizing on the experience mod too. So what I'm telling you is that 15% is going into the blue group, but then you're also going to capitalize on the lower experience mod too. So if you get that back down into that, you know, 0.71 or 0.75 where you started out, that's another 25%.
Yeah, and I keep saying, so maybe it's worth investing.
Like
in
a safety
somebody.
coordinator or something?
Yeah, but part-time, full-time, but the bigger thing is you're gonna gain, and it's gonna pay for itself for sure, may more than pay for itself, but the bigger indicator thing is, it may prevent somebody from having a serious accident.
The other, so do you have a human resources side of it, department,
You know, we don't.
HR side of it?
Yeah.
So that typically what I see on this from an HR standpoint is many of the losses you see are, you hire the loss. You hire the employee that's gonna have the loss. So and I see this in all of my clients, and that's the first conversation and question I have with them when we have a situation, a bad driver or something like
Yeah.
that. It's like, you know, you knew this, so when you call me up and you say, man, he's a really good employee, but he's got 6 speeding tickets and a stop sign violation.
Yeah,
I said,
he
but he's a good employee and you wanna hire him, and we say, okay, you hire him, and then he gets into an accident and your insurance rates go up. Well, you hire what you're going to have, so
Yeah.
you have to almost take that step and say, okay, we're not gonna just settle for somebody. We want somebody that we know is going to be highly functioning in this position. And I know the job market is hard, but a lot of times you just have to say in these certain situations, we just don't wanna sell.
Yeah.
Agreed completely.
So if you flip to the next page, you see the quarterly update on the blue group and the gold group.
Look at the written premium jump for the gold group from 24 to March 25.
That's because there's a swing from the blue to the gold.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The number of, so that it's.
So that's an increased volume of
It's,
people
yeah,
that are
it's
paying, not
it's
an
not
increase.
static, it's,
Okay.
yeah, there were people that dropped,
Right.
such as yourselves.
Well, look at, yeah, you can see that, the blue went down and the gold went up, and that doesn't mean that they've had increased claims, well, it does, but it means more people are now in the gold than
But
they were in the blue.
but you also see, you know, there's three counties in that gold group that just had, you know, situations where, you know, $500,000 losses on a law enforcement person who got into an accident.
Mm.
Then there's, you know, $500,000 loss in the weed district where they were, on a four-wheeler and flipped the four-wheeler and broke the pelvis. So that, there's movement in that, and those are the situations too, so, you know, if you're paying $450,000 or $500,000 in losses, and you're only paying, you know, $55,000 in premium on a really small county or less,
Yeah.
it hits you pretty hard, so there's a pretty good sized swing there. Any questions on that?
Well, yeah, as long as I won't try and figure this out. So if you go through, you say the written premium, like, let's take the blue, you got 19 counties, this is as of March. Your written premium amount is, you got $1.9 million in premiums you've actually executed, I mean, you've issued premiums?
That 1.9 is written, so that means that's endorsed
Mm.
premiums, but it has not been collected yet, so the earned premium is the collected premium.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
And you've had 61 claims, you've lost,
and you had $178,000 in losses,
so you got a pretty good ratio of,
so that's.
is that ratio to your earned versus your loss, or to your written versus your loss?
That's your earned,
Okay, I understand that.
so 12.336, so the magic number to get a return or an upfront discount is 40.
Okay.
So if you can keep it below 40, we're in the chips.
But that percent's gonna climb as the year progresses, right?
That percent is going to climb, but we only have 1 quarter left.
Okay,
Because we're at, you know, the end of our fiscal year for work comp is the 30th of June.
okay.
And as long as we can get things closed out prior to that, so this is another reason why we have this discussion, is make sure that we can get all your claims that need to be closed out before the end of the year. And then that helps everything out.
So right now, like, we're in the gold.
You're in the gold. And
If we can close ours out and that aggregate number stays below 40, what's that do? We might get a refund?
get a return, yeah. Plus your dividend,
Right.
Okay,
which your dividend, you know, you've got 2 dividends, I believe. Correct? And it's not on here,
okay, that's it.
but. We did, your 23 dividend was 21,079, and then your 24 dividend was 20,769. So a 26% in 24 and a 22.9% in 23.
Okay,
So those those percentages are pretty indicative of what I think we'll see, because they're still, performing very well as a company, the Montana State Fund. And typically, we saw prior to, about 4 years ago, it was all loss sensitive, what's your dividend, so you had to have a loss ratio of, 20% or less to get that dividend, but then they took it over the whole policy, or all policyholders got it.
But what that means though is, is 40 the magic number because, what was driving that?
So that 40% number is basically, when you look at it, that's the true losses that they have, okay? And then they have to take everything else into consideration, all of the cost associated with the underwriting, the loss control, all of the other fixed costs that goes into that policy. And that's the number that they feel, and that's truly, it's actually a little, it's about where everybody else is at. 40 to 55 is the number from a profitability standpoint, because then you have to, like I said, you have to take all of the other factors involved with operating the company, that basically says, this is where do we need to be to get you money back.
Where it's still profitable to them, but they can.
So the insurance carrier, yeah, so if they're operating at a 90% experience mod too, they're making money.
Mhm. Interesting.
But it's like when you get into like the 1.2s, or things like that, that means for every dollar they're paying out, they're taking in, they're paying $1.20, so they're
Yeah.
losing money.
That makes sense.
Well, so they're paying for our loss, sounds like.
Well, quite honestly, it's the other policyholders in the state of Montana that are offsetting it.
Right.
So we're likely to make enemies with. I'm kidding, I'm trying to make light of this, but honestly, I think it's a little bit of a surprise to us that we've degraded to this extent. It's not horrible, but it's not good.
No, from where you came from.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not.
Can I ask a question? If we end up going back and finding out that some of these claims, that we don't have these many people on indemnity or that are considered outstanding claims, can this change for the July, or is this kind of?
No, that's set right now.
Okay.
So your calculations, so the experience month calculations are done in April.
Okay.
What
Okay.
will change though is it'll affect our dividend if that whole group comes under 40%. We're sitting at 32 right now, or 33.
But back to your
Okay.
original question, so if they're closed out right now, that's going to ultimately affect the group, like you said, by the end of that July or June 30th. That's where it's gonna be.
Okay.
So the good news is, yeah, right now they're thinking they got 5 people on there,
So
and
they-
they may not be,
So how it works is we have this 32% loss ratio. They take all of the claims that they have that are still open right now, and then they forecast and say, okay, it's gonna cost us this amount of money to get out from underneath this one. So they take that and then they use that in the calculation. So that's a lot of times when I see something this close, I wanna get as many of those claims closed out and shut down so that they can't take that and manipulate that number and bring it over the threshold. where
that'll affect dividends
it-
for everybody in our
It
group.
takes you out of profitability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, they are an insurance company and they do that.
Well, profit's not a dirty word, but it's what it does, if people aren't timely with their, notifying these things are closed, it affects the whole group. The whole group might not get under 40%. And so they'll all lose.
But I will
dividends.
tell you that 20 to 26% discount that you get, or the return that you get, the dividend that you get from the state fund. There is no other carrier out there doing that.
Really?
No, you can get a from a workers, on the workers' compensation side, from a private carrier, if you're in the construction industry class code. There are a certain number of class codes that you can apply to NCCI to get a discount if you have a favorable experience mod and you have a large number of amount of payroll. You can get a construction industry discount from that, but that's about it. So
Do we get any discounts if we were to have a dedicated safety employee?
yeah, I bet we could probably get you out of that 15%, probably 10.
Yeah.
So it's
5
kind
to
of worth
10.
the investment, actually.
I'm telling you, it is, when you really put the numbers to it by having a dedicated person and showing it,
Yeah.
you see it.
Well,
But quite honestly, it doesn't necessarily just mean that dedicated person, it's you three
okay.
are the ones, because I've seen it in different counties. And whether or not that, the county commissioners were extremely frugal but that Mike McGinley,
Hmm.
man, he is like dialed into the numbers on these. He can almost spit it out exactly what it's gonna cost them for whatever claim he has, cause he was just in tune to it. They lost their safety coordinator over there and they've struggled ever since, and their experience mod was like you guys down in that 0.7, and they're back, they're creeping in on 1.00 again.
Problem is you gotta find the right person.
You do.
We don't have a very big resource pool.
No, we don't.
But we might have somebody, I guess what I'm pointing out, we might have somebody that really is expert in safety that, and we need to just think of what we got. That we say, hey, we're gonna have a dedicated role for this, but you're gonna have to be active. And, I can kinda see,
We had Mr. Manderfeld,
Mhm.
is that
I
wrong?
don't know if, of course, he's the guy who
Yeah, he
wrecked
was
the
on,
truck.
yeah.
Sure.
But it wasn't his fault.
Of course not.
Is there a breakdown
The damn
of what
tire
injuries that we're suffering so that we would know, like if,
That's actually, oh, I get you like this,
so if we knew what our, most of our experience mod is, then we could focus on programs that, initially, that programs that would, aim in those areas of safety to prevent those injuries.
Will you take a look at your losses that you have,
Uh-huh,
and then I'll get you a little bit more detailed loss information, but if you take a look at those losses, you're gonna see where they're coming from.
mm-hmm,
Right.
And it's
Well-
gonna show you the losses that you've had, and like what day it is, what time it is, or, do they happen on a Monday and a Thursday? And usually at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock?
sure.
So we can drill down, and we can tell you from an age standpoint, whether or not it's new hires or whether or not it's complacency,
Okay,
is what dictates this.
yeah,
Mike, didn't mean to cut you off, but you were talking about Ron and,
Well, he's still, but then he was off of work, and then they didn't.
Where's those losses at?
You're what?
the ones that Cheryl's got. Cheryl, you got that list?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me take a look at it real quick, and I'll show you that really quick.
Yeah, it's
I just think
interesting.
It's in there, but yeah, it's like, it's kind of fun.
yeah.
I'm not
I
sure.
was just thinking maybe like a training program to remind people, if that's, say lifting, if we're having back injuries, if we're not lifting, if we had like,
But there's only 3 on here that are open. Not 5, there's only 3 that are open.
They did not. thought they were.
If that was found that those three were actually only open from the April first, but just hadn't been updated, would we get the break on the, no?
When we were gonna have.
That's what we definitely need someone
Is that,
tracking.
is that considered, since it has a name, is that considered sort of confidential personal
Yeah,
identification?
she would come in
It doesn't show you that.
Well, they may be one out there now.
and we would sit down and
What I'm,
and go
what I'm
over.
asking you to do,
Like,
you see how you
she'll-
can see
and then
what it
she'll tell
is?
us,
He was
like,
off like
where it's
3
coming
months.
from, is it our
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
it.
considered PII, so we can
Yeah,
have
so like,
it?
have- yeah, and
Well, that's
then
it.
here, there's a training to go with that.
That's
meeting.
all over.
That's
That's what we had,
No.
and that's what we did,
This is
but
the
it's also,
examiner, so Bridget
our
DeFord,
administrator had
Kim
to
Erickson, Bridget
enforce that.
DeFord, Bridget
No,
DeFord,
sure.
Kim Erickson.
When I did it at Costco.
cause if I send you, like, oh, you watch the safety video, you're gonna have to do your own.
It's not the
Like, you know what I mean, typically, unless someone sat down and was like,
Costco was like, it's different, like we had department managers,
Yes.
safety, every month there was something.
you had to sit down and watch.
No, it was like, it was
Oh, I
training,
don't
and we
know.
actually had to like go over, then everybody
Yeah,
had
that
to
would've
stand
been-
and watch. And the video, that we watch,
You had to.
yeah.
Cheryl,
Yeah.
you want me to
Thing.
come, you
Yeah.
wanna,
So that's
Nobody
something.
would let us stand or manage that they had safety training at the end because, well, if you can
Well, that's
imagine
all I
at
got.
Costco, all the
That's it?
different types of
Yeah,
things
oh,
that
yeah.
people
All
do.
sunny.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It was box, safe box cutting techniques, it was, wheel
Well,
torques
we'll work
for
on it.
wheel locks,
Right.
all
It was
kinds
all
of
good stuff,
forklift safety.
From now on, I get hurt, we fire them.
well, you know, when I worked for Jacobs, they had 2 people in 2 weeks die on construction sites. And they implemented what they called a hazardous work assessment, that everybody was required. And I've been with Jacobs for 14 years. So everybody that works here's gotta do a hazardous assessment of your work before you start your work every day.
Every day.
And I said I wasn't gonna do that. And they said, well, then you.
See ya.
Go home. And so it was top down, it was understood. Will not tolerate anybody not taking safety. And then they, all of a sudden they went, they really improved, but, having 2 people, a death
Yeah.
is a serious, serious thing. And they had
Yeah.
one boiler blow up, the guy walked into a room and the boiler blew up. And then they had another issue, I don't know what it was. There's all kinds of things that can happen, which is why you need a really robust safety culture.
You know that if you look at the fatality versus an injury, a major injury, the major injury costs more than the fatality.
Oh, I suppose. Yep. Fatalities over.
It's an ongoing.
Yeah, it's in Montana, the death benefits for a workers' compensation loss are
Nothing,
minimal, yeah.
nothing compared to an injury.
So, the moral of that story is,
Just kill
Don't
them.
die.
no, get injured. Don't die, get injured.
So even in Montana, so if you have and I just, we couldn't figure out why we had still some open claims on a couple of accounts that we had, so we did a little digging into it, and I didn't realize this, but in Montana, that if you pass away, and this was a situation where it was a volunteer that was working at the library, or the museum, I'm sorry, and fell and passed away, and this individual was in his early 80s, and his dependent, his wife, is still collecting benefits, death benefits, because you collect death benefits up to 500 weeks, which is basically 10 years.
Wow.
And then if she passed away, then it would go to a dependent child.
That's crazy.
And are those death benefits just typically wages, or wages and insurance, or what?
Basically, this would have been in the indemnity on what, because he was a volunteer, he didn't get really any wages, so it would have been it's just a negotiated
Okay.
benefit.
I was wondering on those volunteer things, if they take like their regular job,
Right.
if you're a volunteer firefighter, but say your regular job, you're an engineer, do they give them off the,
No,
it's just whatever they negotiate. Makes sense. Even if they have a life insurance policy that's paid out from a primary
doesn't
job?
matter.
On top of it.
It's cheaper to do that than it is to be involved in a lawsuit though, too. And that's why it's set up the way it is. That's what I've been told. by guys like him. Seriously, I was in the national office for the Legion, and holy crap. I'd look at you like you speaking Yugoslavian, and they went over that with us.
I am Croatian.
Well, I wouldn't understand that either. Holy crap. I looked at everybody, like, why am I here? Well, you need to know this. I don't even understand what the guy just said.
Well, you know, in a way, it sounds complicated, it is complicated, but not really, but the bottom line is the biggest red flag I'm getting out of this is we need to oversee our safety committee and see if we can intensify their
The
activity.
safety committee needs to do their job.
Well, I think, for all we know, they may be active, just because we don't see it doesn't mean
I
they're not
think the
doing it.
safety committee
Always
and,
hope to have safety training.
and you all just need to drill down on what.
Yeah.
what-
They need to know it's coming from the top down,
What
and then
kind
like
of,
you said,
what kind of claims that you've had
Yes.
from a severity and a frequency issue.
Yep, yep,
Because-
and training
Because
on
there is
that.
a little frequency issue in there where you're not seeing a lot of, you're seeing small med pay. So, you know, so as they always say, frequency leads to severity, so.
And how often do the safety committee meet with you guys?
Been a couple.
It's been a year, I
yeah,
swear.
it's been over a year since we've had them come in here.
Well, maybe we could get something started where we're at least starting there with the safety committee, getting them on your, on a weekly meeting. Maybe they meet with you, at some time on Fridays.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
But you know, we're only
But we need to know who's on the committee.
I'll find that out.
Yeah, find that out, and then we'll send an email out asking them that we wanna
Meet with the
have them
safety
come in on
committee, yeah.
Friday. Or we'll come in for an as-needed meeting, but we need to meet with them and start discussing this.
Yeah, I would agree.
Haley.
And then we could work with Cheryl, get those identities, and at least start with some training until you figure out what you're gonna do with the coordination. We can get a training, going right away, so that we're not
Right,
waiting
right.
for some,
And then let you know, this is what we're doing, so maybe
We
you'll
have
get a
safety
break,
training meetings.
you know?
We
And
tried to have.
I'd be happy to come
Nobody
over
ever
with
showed up.
order.
well, no, that's just where you just give it to the department, where,
Okay.
the coordinator could make the department heads held accountable to have, and we'll just have sign sheets, you know what I mean? They'll have to sign that they've had the training on and they received the information
See, I'm a
on.
big
Or the
fan of
coordinator
structured routine
can go
business
around to all the
cases.
departments, if you
Yeah.
go that route.
And being-
You know, they can go to the road department, they can go to the sheriff's, they go to the ambulance farm, they go to extension office and get, it's not that complicated. I mean,
Like
it
I
doesn't
said, every
sound,
month they go around to all the different, well,
Yeah.
they pick them. And they go around and do safety checks.
right, well, the whole county's getting the training at
Courthouse,
once.
Safety of them steps out there. That's where we had the most accidents.
I would, yeah, I've tripped up those stairs myself. But I made sure nobody saw me do it.
All right, any more questions?
No, really appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Pleasure.
good.
Oh, yes, pleasure meeting
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
this
You
was so
betcha.
informative.
Thanks for coming
Good to
in.
see you, thank you.
Thanks for spreading all the sunshine. You got it.
Yeah, we're gonna start firing.
Mr. Curley,
Take advantage, give me a call when you get it.
Will, and then if we're gonna actually invest in it, I want you to know if that can help, so that can help us. So we'll- All right, appreciate it, sir.
Thank you for training.
All right, well, you look positive.
Oh, demonstrate
I got a
the
question.
skill too. you
Yes, sir.
know, like-
Yeah, oh,
whatever one you want to tell me.
Oh, I just got like.
We went over and looked at the property.
what do you think?
It's a yes. We do have some questions as to where and
Yeah.
how deep to come off of
Alec Roy.
Alec Roy Road. How deep would you have to go to just make a 10-acre strip right there across the front fence line?
Oh, we'll have to have it surveyed and see, I guess.
Okay,
You want 10 acres?
for what we wanna do and make it for
Told you he's gonna farm
usable,
it. Yeah.
make it usable for
Yeah,
the
parking.
public to use all that kind of stuff that we already have planned. But we just need to know how deep it's gonna go, and there's one hill right in the middle of it,
Yeah,
but we do not wanna deal with the state and putting a culvert in.
yeah.
Coming off the highway because the safety, it's just a bad idea coming off the highway, rather
Oh,
than
yeah,
off
I
Alec Roy
understand
Road.
that. I wouldn't do that, come off Alec Roy.
That's why we were talking about just doing, I don't know how wide the strip would be from the highway in to make a 10-acre strip.
We'll have to have a survey, we may have to look at the planning board, cause we
Yeah,
get
yeah.
some that kinda come under subdivision laws.
Well, yeah, we will, but at least we can get it in the